Hello. Welcome back to my stream for those who are returning, and welcome for the new ones. I hope you enjoy my reading of Forget My Husband, I'll Go Make Money. Chapter 31. A Very Shy Pervert. Part 2. As a result of the king's declaration, Aristine's usage of the old-fashioned carriage became something that happened entirely out of her own will. Not because of the emperor's cold treatment. Since the king of Irigo acknowledged that, no one else could question any farther of the subject. She's not an easy one. The queen maintained a pleasant expression, looking unaffected, and gracefully lifted her glass. Of course, her insides were burning into cinders. Right then, the vigorous voice of a man cut through the silence. I expected the Princess of Sylvanus to be very prideful, but it seems you're more unconstrained than I thought. It is nice to know that the new member of the family has a good nature. When he said the word unconstrained, he exaggerated a lot. That was rather intentional. Aristine looked at the person who was talking. Duke of Esquiela. Her mind ran over the information she had studied while she was eating with Tarkan before the audience. Her mind ran over the information that she had studied. The queen's father, in other words, the grandfather of the first prince, Hamil, and the second prince, Janikarina, and apparently a close advisor to Hamil. Understandably, it was not cautious to mention one's country and go on about it. With your nose held high, however, the king, whose attitude was amicable towards Aristine, did not rebuke. Unlike Sylvanus, which was entrenched in empty formalities and vanity, in Irigo, this level of laxity should be acceptable, but he's testing me. Aristine accurately captured that the king was what was he thinking? Probably something along the lines of, you have to handle this much yourself. It wasn't just the king. Tarkan was also clearly studying her. A corner of Aristine's lips went up. All right. I suppose I have to live up to their expectations then. Meanwhile, people's conversations continued. I like that princess. Is unconstrained as well. After all, she came here as a representative of Sylvanus, and is wearing our Irigo clothes. This shows how much favor she has towards Irigo. Despite calling it favor, their expression looked like they wanted to call it servile behavior. Aristine could see the Sylvanus handmaids mumbling among themselves in the back. They were probably whispering that she should have worn the Sylvanus dress. If she had worn that dress, it would have harmed her more, if that was even possible. And naturally, it wouldn't have benefited her at all. Of course, she wants to appeal to us. I mean, Sylvanus was pushed back in the war, and they're the ones who proposed to end it. It is only right that she tries to please us. That latter statement was omitted. Indeed, look how many attributes there are, and they even added the princess on top of it. Now, they were treating Aristine like she was a tribute, right in front of her face. The Sylvanus who always looked down on Irigo, calling them a country of barbarians, gave them their most noble imperial lot. Those words were practically telling her to know her place, since she was someone who was packed and sold, even though she was an imperial princess. That it was only natural for her to want to carry favor with them and grovel at their feet. The conversation among the royals and nobles was increasingly crossing the line. Of course, this was on purpose. Unlike what they expected, the princess was perfectly fine, so she was past fine. In fact, with just a few words, she gave a glimpse of possible political ability. They had to suppress her now. She didn't know anything because she just arrived at Irigo. And it just happens that the king was choosing to remain a spectator right now. Even Tarquin was just watching quietly, seeming as though he didn't consider her one of his own people. It was unexpected, considering how he carried her away yesterday. But this was actually better. There was no better chance than this. Once their thought reached this point, they sharply began to wag their tongues. Then again, they dared to think lightly of us, and attack us only to be counterattacked, and even lose their territory. Should it be a big deal to give away the princess? Frankly, I think the second princess who's called the jewel of the empire should have come instead of a princess with a flaw of being in confinement. The princess should know her shortcomings, so I believe she will act accordingly. Surely she must have that much sensitivity. In the absence of any restraints, the remarks gradually went over the line. The heated atmosphere he did speak. She deliberately waited for this moment. Aristine carefully opened her mouth. That is odd. Her clear voice instantly drew people's attentions. People shut their mouths when they saw a look they didn't expect on her face. They thought she would be turning red with anger or struck speechless because of the humiliation and scorn. But Aristine actually had the faintest smile on her face. The reason this princess came here in the first place is to end the long-standing hostile relationship between Sylvanus and Irigo, and to bring about peace. A relaxed tone, perfect pitch and pronunciation, an upright back, and straight shoulders. With her dignified figure, befitting of a royal, she could not be called a flawed princess. But all I hear are remarks trying to find fault with me, starting from my carriage to my Irigo attire, and even my upbringing, remarks that tarnish the meaning of this piece. Artine's gaze swept over the people attacking her. It sounds to me like a bunch of you want war. They were all taken aback, and every single one of them rushed to speak, but no word left their mouth. They wanted to refute it, but as a matter of fact, there was nothing logically wrong with what Aristine said. To them, they were only saying such things to bring Aristine down a notch. However, the content of that statement made it seem as though they wanted to drive a wedge in the newly concluded peace in any way possible. In other words, it was not different from lighting themselves on fire and running around the room. By extension, I suppose you wish to go head on against the will of His Majesty Neftir, King of Irigo. All those words, absolute silence fell over the room. Even those who wanted to at least add something to refute shut their mouths. They had to be careful if they consider her an easy target and attack her as thoughtlessly as before. They might really get branded as people opposing the king's will. Of course, I'm sure that's not your intention at all. Aristine's eyes curved into a sweet smile. Yes, indeed. How can that be our intention? We're all gathered here for the sake of peace. I'm glad you understood this, princess. Aristine smirked when she saw the nobles agreeing with the awkward smiles. It was more effective to give them one hole to breathe than to push them hard without any path to escape. Only then will they act the way I want. They had no choice but to try and escape from the breathing hole she made. And it should be obvious that Aristine had no intention of fighting against all these nobles. There's a similar phrase from my previous life. To catch a general, you have to catch the horse they're riding first. And the horse they're riding is Hamil, Duke of Esquiela. Upon hearing Aristine calling him the Duke of Esquiela, grew tense. Now he knew that the princess was not as soft of a target as he thought. The end of chapter 31. Chapter 32. A Very Shy Purpur, Part 3. As you said, I wore Irigo clothing to show my favor towards Irigo. If that's the case, it seems your eyes only see one thing, Duke. As she spoke, Aristine's purple eyes were tinged with sadness and disappointment. Just as you had expectations of me, I also had high expectations of you. She even clicked her tongue softly. No one would dare act like this to the Duke of Esquiela, father of the Queen and grandfather to Hamil, the #1 successor to the throne. However, Aristine did not hide her contempt. She was completely looking down on the Duke, in the exact same way they did to her just now. There was a very distinctive difference between a majority overwhelming one person and one person overwhelming one majority. I said I use a carriage because I wanted to see the effects of the war on both countries with my own eyes. You did say that? So you're trying to remind me of that right now? My memory is not that bad, princess, said the Duke of Esquiela. Oh no, pardon me. I didn't know you remember. Aristine's eyes widened as if she was startled. If you remember, then perhaps I might have some reason for wearing Irigo attire. As the word slowly left her mouth, her lips drew a small arc. It's what I thought you would naturally consider. Her smile was beautiful enough to draw your gaze away in an instant, but the meaning behind the smile was vicious. The obvious ridicule made the Duke of Esquiela clench his jaw. From the looks of it seems you're not able to think that far, Duke. This arrogant princess was treating him like a fool. What is so great about her dress? Anyone can tell that her clothes are entirely Irigoyen. And just when the Duke Esquiela's gaze fell on Aristine's dress, Sylvanian carrier silk. Pelamian, who took a close look at Aristine's dress, after hearing that, mumbled softly. That is correct, Princess Pelamian. Aristine nodded softly and picked the hem of her dress. This is made of Sylvanus Sylvanian carrier silk. Now, do you understand what I mean? Her eyes were practically saying that, almost as if she was kind and friendly adult, teaching an ignorant child. Sylvanus had always been famous for its beautiful and high-quality silk. Among them, the Sylvanian carrier silk was a special product that was produced entirely for the imperial palace, and that silk was used to make this Irigo appeal. I doubt there is anything more appropriate to symbolize the union of two countries. The silk would originally have been offered to His Majesty Neftir, but I imagine I can accept this as a wedding gift, right? Aristine flashed Neftir a bright smile. Seeing the smile, the king momentarily fell silent, and soon boisterous laughter resounded through the wall. It was driving the silence away. Right, I present Dazzle to you, princess. It suits you very well. It is worthy to be called the present. The king's broad smile could be heard in his voice. It seems that the princess is the only one here who truly thinks about the peace and future of our two countries. I urge everyone to emulate the princess. Those words imprinted themselves in the minds of everyone in the room. This was the first time the king sounded so pleased since Tarkan killed the great demonic beast, Murzika, at 10 years of age. At that time, the young priest, whom no one expected anything from, showed amazing capabilities. The same thing was happening now. No one really expected anything from Aristine. However, she skillfully dealt with the insults that flew her way, and even returned it with a nice package. And someone like her had become Tarkan's partner. This is practically giving wings to a tiger. Princess Aristine, huh? And I was told she's a lunatic who was locked up and uneducated. This is turning out to be quite interesting. The nobles who had been quietly watching everything unfold without joining the whispering thought to themselves, as their eyes lit up. Good. Everything is going as expected. Maybe I should say thanks. Aristine thought as she glanced at the Duke of Esquila. Although she was Tarkan's partner in a political marriage, she was also the representative of the Sylvanus delegation. It was unprecedented of a representative to wear Irigo attire to an official audience with the delegation. There was no way these hyenas would not point out what the Sylvanus maids were able to pick out. Which is why I asked Tarkan for this. Fortunately, Irigo clothing had a style that emphasized the flow and beauty of the fabric itself. If it needed a lot of cutting and sewing like Sylvanus dresses, then it would have been possible to make it on time. Furthermore, the formal attire here did not require embroideries like jewels or ribbon to be sewed on the dress like in Sylvanus. And Irigo, it was a costume to decorate the person with platinum and gold-plated jewels. Gorgeous body chains or arm rings rather than the dress itself. Thanks to that, it was finished just in time. Ta-da! As soon as the hall quieted down, the king of Irigo opened his mouth. I could have said a seat now, and we've exchanged our greetings. His gaze moved to the queen, but it seems the servants calculated the seats wrong. The annoying of chairs of all things. The queen spoke up with an apologetic face. This is my fault for not checking beforehand. I'm ashamed to face the princess. I understand even if you're upset with me. Even though she was saying you can blame me, she didn't expect anyone to actually blame her. How can I expect the queen to handle every little thing? I do not mind. And sure enough, Aristine, who hadn't let go of any words since she came in, took a step back. And the moment the queen let out a smile, "But since your majesty, the queen has apologized, I will gladly accept, so do not worry." Aristine said with a smile full of goodwill. The smile of the queen's face instantly cracked. Aristine's words assumed that the queen had apologized. The queen had never apologized to her, nor did she intend to apologize. But she couldn't get up and said that she never apologized here. She only said that to appear virtuous. But she also clearly acknowledged her own negligence and said she couldn't face the queen, the princess. If she says it was no apology now, that would be slapping her own face. The queen tried to smile and appear benevolent. You have a kind heart, princess. Tarkan is very blessed to have such a bride. Yes, as you say, my blessings seem to be overflowing, your majesty. The queen's mouth trembled when she heard her words completely twisted. That's it. What shall we do? There are no seats for the two of you. The queen's gaze swept over the audience hall. Then she pointed at an empty stop, as if she had just discovered it. Ah, it seems there's an empty spot right there. You can keep it standing. Why don't you sit over there for now? The place the queen recommended to Aristine was usually for people in the lowest position. In fact, it was a spot left empty to make it easier for court servants to remain on a standby without sitting down. Naturally, there were no chairs, only the cold floor. Now, what are you going to do? The queen's eyes turned to Aristine, like a snake looking at its prey. But Aristine's eyes, which should have been angry, were shining brightly, with a lot of delight of that. There wasn't even a hint of embarrassment. It was such a strong display of emotion from the princess, whose emotions had remained unclear even when she was smiling, expressionless, or ridiculing someone. Why? Seeing Aristine so happy, the queen suddenly got nervous. The end of chapter 32. Chapter 33. A Very Shy Pervert, Part 4. It was an attempt to thoroughly humiliate Aristine, and let her truly understand who the real authority in this place was. Even if she was an imperial princess in Aragon's political circles, she was simply at the very bottom. The queen wanted to show the fact to the princess as well as other nobles that were in the venue. But did it give the princess an excuse to counterattack instead? She couldn't help but think that, because Aristine had shown significant political competence so far, the queen wasn't the only one who was anxious. Tarquin was also feeling uneasy. Of course, it was for a completely different reason from the queen. Tarquin was well aware of how perplexing his bride could be. She's not going to start saying things like pervert or whatnot here, is she? The thought unconsciously crossed his mind when he saw Aristine's eyes begin to sparkle. Normally, such a thought would be quite random, but considering who he was talking about here, if it is this woman, it's very possible. It was quite a talent to make Tarquin, who had never shaken, even when he was surrounded by demonic beasts, feel uneasy in the blink of an eye. Tarquin quickly wrapped his arm around Aristine's shoulder before she caused trouble. Her slender shoulders were smoothly cocked in his hand. He ignored the puzzled gaze Aristine sent to him and spoke to the queen. The banquet is yet to begin, but it seems the queen is already drunk. Drunk? Otherwise you wouldn't possibly tell the princess to sit at the lowest position. Simply put, he was saying she wouldn't utter such words if she was in her right mind. Seeing the queen's expression hardened, Tarquin pulled Aristine a little closer to himself. The princess' presence in Irigo can be said to be a symbol of peace itself. But to think you want the princess to sit at the lowest possible position. His golden eyes look languid and relaxed even at this moment. I trust this doesn't mean that your majesty the queen is declaring the peace should be placed at the lowest position. The queen's lips trembled. He wasn't the only one surprised by what was happening. The other royals and nobles, and even the king, were surprised. Tarquin stepped forward to protect someone? And with no such political wordplay at that? This was something they never thought they would see in a million years. Tarquin had always been the type to take care of his own people, but that was usually dealt with, by his overwhelming presence, which made people shrink back by themselves. A good example would be when he first carried Aristine away. Oh, for His Highness Tarquin to step forward like this is getting interesting. The eyes of Marquis Isara, who had been maintaining his neutrality, lit up. Tarkan had proved himself through his actions rather than his words, befitting his title as a warrior. He only dealt with people, blocking his path in two ways: ignore them or cut them down. He had never used political wordplay or social construct in this manner. This is why the nobles were even more eager to jump on Hamil's bandwagon. However, what happened just now revealed that Tarkan's lack of political exchanges wasn't because he couldn't. He simply didn't do it because he did not want to. That must be quite confusing for the people who look down on Tarkan all this time. I thought he wasn't interested in the throne. Has he changed his mind? If that's not the case, then... Marquis Isara's case moved to Aristine, who was in Tarkan's arms. I doubt he did for that princess. After all, this was Tarkan of all people. How could that be? Despite thinking that, Marquis Isara couldn't move his eyes away from Tarkan's hand, which was firmly holding Aristine's shoulders. I don't know His Highness' exact intentions, but it's unexpected that for the first time, he steps forward like this because of the princess. Although Tarkan's actions caught the eyes of the Marquis off guard, it was even more surprising because Aristine was the reason behind Tarkan's actions. The same went for everyone sitting in his hall. Meanwhile, Diana's complexion was alarmingly dark. From where she sat amongst the nobles, her hands gripped her knees so strongly that the veins of her arms were bulging. Regardless of people's reactions, Tarkan continued to say what he wanted to say. Or is there another issue other than the drunkenness? Have you gone senile? The meaning behind Tarkan's words was obvious. The queen's mouth twisted. Of course, that is not what I meant. I thought it wouldn't be right to keep the princess standing like she was being punished. So I simply found an empty spot. Well, the space is easily made, no? Tarkan's gaze moved to the platform where the immediate members of the royal family were sitting. According to the court hierarchy, Aristine and Tarkan should be sitting there. I believe everyone is willing to make room for peace. His icy golden eyes swept over the prince and princesses. It was practically threatening them to get up and move. The royals felt like they were being suffocated by an intangible pressure. They hated this. They hated that they were overwhelmed by this lowly bastard. However, there was a limit to how much one could endure for the sake of their pride. Martin, who was receiving the most concentrated gaze, finally got up from his seat. Of course, I shall concede my seat. I shall concede my seat to the beautiful princess. The queen's sharp gaze turned to Martin. Martin acted like he didn't notice and smiled to Aristine. Thank you, Prince Martin. Not at all. When Aristine thanked him, Martin forgot the situation he was in and grinned widely. I already knew this fool would lose his mind in front of a woman. The queen clicked her tongue. Pathetic beyond comparison. How could he be so different when he was the same age as Tarkan? Let's go, Tarkan. A couple should stay together. At those words, the hand wrapped around Aristine's shoulders flinched. Did he say something strange? Aristine looked up at him, puzzled, but Tarkan stuck her to the platform without saying anything. Maybe I imagined it. As she thought that, Aristine clenched her fist. Her business partner had worked hard for her sake, so naturally she couldn't remain idle. I have to take care of Tarkan's seat. He was her husband. After all, she couldn't let him sit on the ground like that. Upon making contact with the princess, Esterlina flinched. After getting scolded due to what happened yesterday, she had been restless in her seat, wondering if she should get up and move. She wasn't afraid of the princess, but she was scared of Pelemium. In addition, the person in the weakest position here was none other than Esterline. However, Aristine's gaze swept past her and moved to another person. Every seat here has its own political meaning, but there's no reason to go for an empty husk. The best choice was the medial royal child with the most influence in the absence of Prince Hamil. We're going to be married soon, so we should sit next to each other, don't you think? Needless to say, there was only one person that fit the bill. It is not me, but a marriage that is a symbol of peace. Princess Jenny Karine. Her words were directed to Tarkin, but her gaze was locked on Jenny Karine. The seats on both sides of the third Prince Martin were normally reserved for the second Prince Tarkin and the second Princess Jenny Karine. Since there was no seat for Tarkin, the first Princess Balemian and second Princess Jenny Karine were sitting there. Aristine gave Jenny Karine a bright smile. Come to think of it, Jenica, you said you were happy we were getting married, didn't you? Well, now is the time to show that with your actions. Besides, isn't this your mother's fault? Her violet eyes gleamed like a predator before its prey. She hadn't even gotten married yet, but her gaze was far so much like Tarkin's. Jenica's eyes swept around her. The nobles, even her royal father, were watching her closely. Jenny Karine wanted the image of herself to be that of a charming, innocent, and adorable child. She wanted others to see her that way, and she enjoyed the sort of gaze. Due to that, it was difficult to stand her ground here, because an innocent and kind child would get up right away with a bright smile and say, "Ah, then Jenica will give you this seat." But if she were to lose her seat and move to a lower position, there were many who would politically interpret that loss as a retreat and gossip about it. If she, Hamel's biological sister, were to concede the seat to Tarkin and go to a corner that doesn't even have nobles. No, even if that's not the case, I don't want to give up my seat to this garbage princess. She'd rather be caught dead. However, people were still looking at her. That's the end of chapter 33. That's everything for today. I hope you enjoyed it and look forward to tomorrow's episodes. Thank you. Have a good night, good afternoon, good morning, and just enjoy your time.